Tonight, we journey back to the heart of winter in the year 1949, when the winds howled like wolves across the endless prairies, and snow fell so fiercely it seemed the sky itself had turned to ice. This was the blizzard that swallowed barns whole, buried trains on their tracks, and tested the will of every man, woman, and child who lived on the Great Plains. It was a storm of memory and legend, one that would linger in stories for generations. But before we begin, I want to pause for just a moment. If you are listening in the quiet of your bedroom, perhaps already nestled beneath warm blankets, or if you are sitting far away with headphones on, I want to welcome you. To all of you tuning in from the United States, from Europe, from Asia, from Africa, and from the many corners of the world, thank you for being here tonight. Tell me, where are you watching from, and what time is it there? I would truly love to know. If you haven't yet, take a second to like this video, to subscribe if you enjoy these journeys into history and storytelling, and leave a comment below about your own connection to winter storms, or simply about where you are listening from. Your stories, your presence, bring life to this channel. Now take a deep breath, make sure you are comfortable, your blanket pulled close, your pillow fluffed, perhaps a cup of tea still warm beside you. Dim the lights, let the room soften into calm, because tonight we step into the past, into the stillness and the fury of a storm that refused to be forgotten. The first days of January 1949 seemed unremarkable on the wide open plains. The sun, pale and tired, hung low in the sky as if it too was weary of winter. Each morning, frost clung like lace to window panes, etching delicate crystals that melted only when the stoves were stoked hot enough inside the farmhouses. The air smelled faintly of wood smoke and kerosene, scents of survival that carried across the flat miles. For the families scattered across Nebraska, Wyoming, South Dakota, and Colorado, winter was familiar, an annual trial. They were used to crisp mornings where boots cracked the ice along water troughs, to evenings when the stars glittered with such clarity it seemed one could fall into them. But this winter carried a different silence. It was the kind of silence that pressed heavily on the chest, a silence that seemed to listen back. Snow came at first as a whisper, small flakes tumbling lazily, so light they seemed to hover in the air before touching the earth. A thin coat-covered fence rails dusted the ridge of barn roofs and settled into the grooves of wagon wheels, long since abandoned by the side of the road. Children laughed as they caught flakes on their tongues, their cheeks flushed pink from the cold, unaware of how quickly delight can turn to dread. Inside the homes there was warmth and routine. Pots of beans simmered on cast-iron stoves, and bread rose in pans as mothers moved quietly about their kitchens. Fathers returned from chores with red hands and noses, stamping snow from their boots before sitting down to supper. Radios crackled with faint voices from distant cities, announcers speaking of fronts moving in from the Pacific Northwest, though no one paid much attention. Weather was always coming, weather was always changing. Yet animals sensed what people did not. Horses shifted uneasily in their stalls, their breath puffing out in restless clouds. Cattle gathered closer together in the pastures, lowing softly as if conferring in secret. Even the crows along the fence posts seemed unsettled, taking flight too suddenly, circling against a sky already dimming with unnatural speed. By late afternoon the snow deepened, no longer delicate, but steady, persistent. The sound of it was subtle, a constant hiss, as though the sky itself were exhaling. Lanterns glowed behind frosted windows, little halos of gold against the coming dark. Families drew close, children tucked beneath quilts, their ears straining to the growing voice of the wind. It began to whistle down chimneys, to rattle the loose slats of barns, to moan across empty fields in a tone that was not quite natural. It was only the beginning, yet already the world felt smaller, enclosed by the curtain of falling white. People spoke in hushed tones as if the storm might hear them. And somewhere out there, beyond the reach of lamplight and stove heat, the true blizzard was gathering its strength, waiting for the moment to descend. By the next morning, the land no longer looked familiar. What had been a gentle white blanket only hours before was now thick and weighty, covering fence lines, muffling footsteps, and erasing the familiar shapes of the earth. The prairie, so vast and usually defined by endless horizons, had become a shapeless expanse where sky and ground blurred into one. The air itself seemed different, denser, sharper. Each breath stung as it entered the lungs, carrying the metallic tang of deep cold. The sky had lost its pale softness, darkening instead into a heavy lid of grey, pressing downward as though it wished to smother the land. Even the sound of life was changing. No bird calls, no crunch of horse hooves on the frozen dirt, only the steady rustle of snowflakes that no longer floated but drove sideways, needled by wind. Inside farmhouses, morning chores were delayed as families huddled in kitchens, listening. Radios sputtered warnings now, words half lost in static. Cold front, dangerous conditions, remain indoors. Few had heard such words before. These were people who had survived drought and dust storms, who had worked land that gave little without a fight. But even hardened hands began to tighten around coffee mugs, and mothers kept glancing at the windows, uneasy at the way the light outside had turned strangely dim for mid-morning. Cattle bawled in distant pastures, their cries carried thinly across the wind. Some farmers went out despite the warnings, leaning into the gale with scarves wrapped around their faces, eyes squinting against the sting of ice. They hauled hay from stacked barns, scattering it for the animals, but already drifts were climbing past their knees. Snow clung to coats, froze in beards, and gathered in the creases of gloves until fingers went numb. Each step back toward home felt longer, as if the storm were stretching the distance. By afternoon, the storm revealed its true force. Winds screamed across the plains at speeds that stripped shingles from roofs and drove nails of ice against windows. Snow no longer fell in gentle flakes, but in fierce, blinding sheets, erasing barns, fences, and even nearby roads from sight. Families pressed rags along door frames to block the drafts, and stoves roared with wood and coal, fighting back the chill that crept under doors and across floors like a living thing. Children grew quiet, sensing the gravity of it all. They played less and clung closer to their mothers, listening to the rattle of the house as the gale pressed against it with unrelenting force. Fathers stood at windows, staring out into the blank wall of white, knowing that somewhere out there, animals were stranded, neighbors were cut off, and the land itself was changing under the weight of snow. It was no longer a storm of whispers or warnings. The blizzard had arrived in full, and with it came the first true test of endurance. By nightfall, the storm had sealed the world. Windows were no longer windows, but pale sheets of frost, their glass vibrating with the unbroken roar of wind. Snow climbed higher and higher, piling against walls, drifting over porches, and swallowing fences until it was impossible to tell where the earth ended and the sky began. Inside the homes, scattered across the plains, people lit extra lanterns. Their glow was dim and golden, barely holding back the gloom that pressed in through the cracks. The flames inside cast long shadows across wood floors, and every creak of the timbers sounded louder, as though the house itself was straining to withstand the storm. The air inside was thick with the smell of coal smoke, damp wool drying near the stove, and the faint tang of kerosene. Families gathered together in the warmest rooms, layered in sweaters and quilts. Some children sat cross-legged on the floor, clutching tin cups of warm milk, their eyes reflecting the lantern's glow. Others drifted in and out of uneasy sleep, lulled not by calm but by the ceaseless howling outside. For those who ventured even a few steps outdoors, the world became immediately alien. A man could not see his own barn 20 yards from his door. The snow drove sideways in icy spears, blinding the eyes and numbing the face in seconds. Every gust felt like a hand shoving the body backward, and every pause in movement was a risk, the cold clawing deeper into fingers, toes, lungs. Some turned back quickly, realizing how easily a wrong step could mean never finding the way home again. Animals fared no better. Horses whinnied anxiously in their stalls, stamping their hooves against frozen ground. Cattle, caught in pastures, pressed together for warmth, their bodies half buried in snowdrifts that climbed with frightening speed. Their breath steamed into the air, quickly whipped away by the gale. Dogs pawed at doors, desperate for shelter, their fur coated in icy clumps that rattled when they shook. Time itself began to blur. Morning looked no different from evening, and hours passed unnoticed, swallowed by the storm's monotony. Families lost track of day and night, measuring instead by the dwindling stack of firewood, the slow burn of kerosene in lamps, and the hunger that stirred when meals grew scarce. The plains had become a world of white and silence, broken only by the scream of the wind, a world where every moment was about waiting, enduring, and hoping the storm might finally pass. The blizzard carried on through the night, and for the first time in memory, the sky itself seemed to vanish. Where there should have been stars, cold and bright, scattered across the prairie heavens, there was only darkness, thick and impenetrable. The moon did not shine, the constellations did not guide, and even the sound of silence that usually filled winter nights was gone, replaced by the endless, battering voice of the wind. Inside small farmhouses, families lay awake, listening. The windows rattled in their frames, thin sheets of glass quivering as though they might splinter. Snowflakes forced their way through the tiniest cracks, drifting down onto window sills, forming delicate piles that sparkled in lantern light. Mothers rose quietly in the night to check on children, tucking quilts tighter around shoulders, brushing cold hair from foreheads and whispering comfort they barely believed themselves. The cold was no longer just outside, it seeped into bones, into walls, into the air itself. Breath fogged in bedrooms and even close to the stove, toes ached beneath socks and boots. Water left in pails by the fire froze along its rim, a fragile crust that broke beneath the ladle. Every movement felt slower, stiffer, as though the storm itself had crept into the joints of those sheltering within. For the men of the houses, sleep was restless. They worried about cattle, about horses, about neighbors perhaps stranded on the road between towns. Some had tried to write letters or notes by lantern glow, words trembling across paper, only to stop halfway, their pens freezing mid-thought, as if the storm had pressed into their minds too. Others simply sat near the window, staring into the wall of white, imagining they saw shapes move out there, phantoms of trees or fence lines swallowed by the drift. Far away in towns and small cities, the story was the same. Streets that once bustled with wagons, cars, or children's laughter were silent and gone. Storefronts disappeared under banks of snow taller than men, and trains sat immobilized on their tracks, their whistles frozen into silence. Those who lived in upstairs rooms peered down at a world erased, the outlines of roofs and chimneys barely breaking through the flat whiteness that had smothered all familiar landmarks. The night stretched long, longer than any before. The wind seemed to gain a rhythm, rising and falling like some enormous breath, an ancient force reminding every listener of their fragility. And when at last some drifted into uneasy slumber, it was with the awareness that outside their walls the land itself was being reshaped, buried, bent, and remade by snow. When dawn finally arrived, it brought no comfort. The storm had not ended, and the morning light did not brighten the world. Instead, a dull grey glow seeped through the clouds, as though the sky itself were made of ash. The wind still roared, carrying needles of snow that stung any skin exposed to the air, and the world beyond the windows remained a shifting sea of white. The first sound many families heard was the groaning of roofs. Heavy snow, layered through the night, pressed down with relentless weight. Icicles stretched from eaves like glass daggers, swaying in the wind, sometimes snapping loose and shattering on the frozen ground. Doors could not be opened easily. Snow had packed itself high against them, forming barriers that turned homes into cages. Those who tried to push their way out with shovels found themselves facing walls of snow taller than their heads. Inside, the rhythms of survival continued. Stoves were fed with whatever fuel could be found: coal, wood, corn cobs, even furniture when supplies ran low. The air inside houses smelled of burning resin, of wool drying on lines, of broth simmering in battered pots. Children were given what little warm food there was: biscuits, soup, or porridge, while parents often waited until later, stretching every bit to last through uncertain days. Every sound carried weight in those mornings. The creak of wood as houses strained under snow. The sudden crack of distant trees snapping under ice. The muted, mournful low of cattle buried somewhere in the white. Even the ticking of a clock became sharper, more insistent, as though it alone still counted the hours in a world where time had lost meaning. Some families gathered close to radios, their ears straining to catch broken words between bursts of static. Reports spoke of trains halted mid-journey, of towns buried, of highways vanishing beneath drifts. There were stories of travelers stranded in their cars, unable to move forward or back, praying for rescue before the cold claimed them. Yet most people could only listen, helpless, as the storm outside kept them bound in place. Still, amidst the hardship, there were glimmers of tenderness. Mothers wrapped children in extra blankets and told stories to keep fear at bay. Fathers carved small toys from scraps of wood, or played quiet games of cards by lantern light. Families sang hymns in low voices, the sound carrying softly against the endless howl of the storm, like small flames of hope flickering against the dark. Morning brought no end to the blizzard, but it brought a choice: to despair or to endure. And though the cold pressed in, though hunger gnawed and snow buried everything familiar, most chose endurance. By the second day, the storm had woven a curtain so thick that entire communities vanished from one another's sight. Where once a neighbor's homestead could be seen across the stretch of prairie, a lantern glowing in the distance, or the dark outline of a barn, there was now only whiteness, endless and shifting. For many families, this was the most unsettling truth of all: the sense of being utterly alone. In fair weather, the plains were vast, but never lonely, for there was always a sense that others were near. Now the storm had swallowed that comfort, leaving each household as its own fragile island adrift in a sea of snow. Some men tried to bridge the gap, venturing out with ropes tied around their waists so they might find their way back. They fought through drifts as high as their shoulders, leaning into winds that shoved like an invisible hand. Every breath was fire in the chest, every exhale freezing instantly on scarves and beards. Even so, many could only make it a few yards before being forced back, the rope pulling taut as if it were a lifeline against the blizzard's hunger. In towns it was much the same. Streets disappeared, storefronts vanished, snow pressed against second-story windows, rising so high that doors could no longer be opened from the ground. People tunneled through drifts like moles, carving narrow passageways just to reach a neighbor, though even those passages closed quickly, filled in by the restless wind. The muffled sound of shovels carried through the storm, faint and ghost-like, reminding each listener that others were struggling too. Inside, families waited and worried. They thought of elderly neighbors living alone, of mothers with infants, of those caught between towns when the storm descended. Letters that had once been written with steady hands now sat unfinished on tables, their ink frozen in bottles. And though everyone longed for news, the radios offered little comfort, just the same warnings and desperate reports blurred by static. Yet even in such isolation, human kindness endured. Some families left food parcels just outside their doors, hoping they might be found by anyone lost in the storm. Others tied lanterns high on poles, their dim glow swallowed quickly by snow, but burning nonetheless, a signal of life, of welcome, of survival. The blizzard had taken away distance and direction, but it had not yet taken away the will to reach one another, even through the drift. By the third day, the storm had reshaped the world entirely. Snow no longer rested gently upon the land. It had become architecture, sculpting mountains where there had been open fields, burying fences, wagons, and even the tallest prairie grass under smooth, unbroken drifts. Roofs bore the greatest burden. Every hour more snow pressed down, and timbers groaned under its weight. Families listened with dread to the low cracks above them, wondering if the roof might give way. Some fathers climbed into attics with shovels and axes, hacking small holes through shingles to push the snow off in desperate piles, only to find those holes sealed again within minutes. Others climbed out through upper windows, crawling onto the roof like sailors climbing the rigging of a storm-tossed ship, shoveling furiously before being forced back inside by the wind. Barns and sheds were less fortunate. Across the plains, wooden beams bowed and buckled, their shapes twisting before collapsing altogether in muffled thuds that echoed like distant thunder. Horses shrieked when walls gave way, and cattle scattered blindly into drifts, many never to be seen again. Dogs barked helplessly at the noise, pacing the edges of doors they could not open. Inside the homes, snow began to seep through cracks in the roof, melting against stove heat and dripping into buckets placed carefully beneath. Floors grew damp, rugs sodden, and yet families adjusted. Quilts were hung across doors to block drafts, and children were bundled in layer upon layer of clothing, their noses pink above scarves even while indoors. The smell of damp wood and smoke lingered in every room. Soup boiled slowly, stretched thin with potatoes, beans, and scraps of meat, the broth ladled carefully so each bowl received at least a little warmth. Coffee grounds were reused, boiled again and again, until the drink was pale and bitter, yet still cherished for the heat it carried into the body. Outside, the soundscape was strange. The wind never ceased, but beneath it came new noises, the muffled roar of snow sliding from a roof, the sharp crack of ice splitting along tree limbs, the sudden dull boom of a building succumbing to weight. Each sound reminded those inside how fragile their shelters were, how thin the barrier between warmth and the merciless cold. Still, people endured. They whispered prayers before sleep, not only for their own safety but for the land itself, that the earth, buried under so much white, might one day breathe again. By the fourth morning, the storm had become a presence, something more than weather, something that felt alive. Families began to speak of it in hushed tones, as if it might overhear. It howled, it pressed, it whispered against the glass, and always it seemed to linger just at the threshold, testing the strength of wood and stone. Windows were no longer clear. Frost had painted them thick, curling into patterns of ferns and feathers, sealing the outside world away. Children traced their fingers over the icy designs, their breath fogging the glass, trying to see beyond. But there was nothing, only a wall of white, so dense and swirling it seemed almost solid. From behind the glass, shadows sometimes appeared. A fence post buried to its top rail, a tree limb, black and skeletal, swaying in the gale. Once in a while, a darker blur moved past, a stray animal, or perhaps a neighbor, braving the storm, but it vanished almost immediately, swallowed by the shifting curtain of snow. For those watching from inside, such glimpses felt haunting, like seeing figures in a dream that could never be reached. The days themselves blurred together. Families slept in shifts, some keeping watch by the stove to ensure the fire did not fade. Without it, the cold advanced mercilessly, creeping into fingers, stiffening joints, making breath hang heavy in the air. Coal bins and woodpiles shrank faster than anyone wished, each handful carefully measured, each log considered precious. In those dim hours, storytelling became as vital as food. Parents recited tales from memory, their voices steady and low, weaving comfort from old myths, Bible verses, or recollections of sunnier times. Children clutched dolls or small carved toys, listening with wide eyes, the storm's fury softened by the cadence of words. Some sang in quiet voices, hymns or lullabies, their notes rising faintly against the groan of timbers and the hiss of snow. Yet there were moments when even words failed. When the lantern light flickered, shadows lengthened on the walls, and the only sound was the storm itself, endless and unyielding. In those silences, the weight of the blizzard pressed heaviest, reminding all who listened that beyond their fragile walls the great plains lay buried, transformed, and utterly alone beneath the snow. By the fifth day, the blizzard had erased more than the horizon. It had erased direction itself. Roads, once lifelines threading through towns and across open country, had disappeared beneath mountains of snow. Fences and mile markers lay buried, and even telephone poles, tall and sturdy, were swallowed until only their tops poked above the drifts, like lonely black stubs in a field of white. Travel became not just dangerous but impossible. Wagons and cars, abandoned when the storm struck, were now entombed in ice, their shapes reduced to vague humps under the snow. Even train lines, once steady and strong, had ground to silence. Engines sat frozen on tracks, their smokestacks choked with frost, their whistles mute. Passengers huddled inside dark cars, blankets wrapped around them, waiting for rescue that would not come soon. For families in isolated farmhouses, the absence of roads meant the absence of connection. The doctor in the next town might as well have been across the ocean. The storehouse of grain, the supplies at the mercantile, the church where voices once rose together, all of it had vanished behind a barrier no shovel could pierce. Every home was now an island, self-contained, its survival dependent on what had already been stored inside. Children asked questions their parents could not answer. When will the road be clear again? When will the postman come? Will the school reopen soon? Parents gave soft answers. Words meant more to soothe than to inform, for they too had no knowledge of what day or hour the storm might relent. Meanwhile, the animals bore their own suffering. Chickens huddled together in dark coops, feathers puffed, frost clinging to combs. Cows stood silent and still, their hides rimed with ice, their tails stiff. Dogs pawed anxiously at doors, their instincts urging them to run, to seek, to hunt. But outside was a world without scent, without path, without meaning. Inside, life narrowed to essentials. Each meal was rationed, each bucket of water guarded. Fires were fed slowly, carefully, lest the fuel vanish too quickly. The sound of the wind, once background, became constant company, a reminder that nature ruled absolutely now. The roads had vanished, but so too had certainty. And in that erasure, the Great Plains seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what might come next. By the 6th day, the storm's relentlessness began to weigh on the spirit as much as the body. Families huddled around fires that burned low and flickering, watching sparks drift lazily upward into soot-streaked chimneys. The flames offered more than warmth. They offered rhythm, a heartbeat against the endless white. Smoke curled thickly, carrying the familiar scent of burning wood, mingling with the faint tang of melting snow that seeped through roof cracks. It was a smell that became a kind of anchor, a reassurance that life continued inside, even while the world outside had been transformed into an icy void. Lanterns added their dim glow, swaying slightly as the wind pressed against walls and windows, casting dancing shadows that stretched and shrank across quilts and furniture. Children became quiet observers of this light and shadow, lying close to their mothers or curled against siblings. Some traced the flicker of flames on the walls with wide eyes, imagining shapes in the dancing shadows, horses galloping, barns collapsing, snowflakes larger than houses. Their imaginations both soothed and stirred anxiety, giving the storm a form they could understand, even if they could not see the outside world clearly. Meals were simpler than before. Bread stretched thin, soup diluted, coffee bitter, but each bite carried comfort, each sip of warmth an affirmation that survival was possible. Parents ate little themselves, saving portions for children. Each mouthful was taken slowly, deliberately, as if savoring the act of nourishment itself might counter the endless cold pressing in from every side. Outside, the wind never ceased. Its moan came in waves, first low and threatening, then rising to a shrill scream that rattled shingles and lifted loose snow into mini whirlwinds across the drifts. Sometimes the sound was accompanied by the sudden muffled boom of snow collapsing from a roof, or the dull thud of a barn wall finally giving under the storm's weight. Inside, hearts jumped at every noise, and hands tightened around mugs or each other. Yet within this turmoil there were moments of quiet humanity. Fathers and mothers whispered soft reassurances, sharing memories of winters past, of sunlit fields, of small triumphs over cold and hunger. Children, lulled by the warmth and rhythm of indoor life, sometimes drifted into sleep, their breaths slow and even. And though the world outside was relentless, the fires within provided a soft, steady light, a heartbeat of safety amidst chaos. By the 7th day, the rivers that once wound like silver ribbons across the plains were hidden beneath thick sheets of ice and snow. Where water had flowed, there was now only a flat expanse, shimmering faintly grey beneath the storm's veil, silent except for the occasional groan of ice shifting beneath its frozen weight. Farmers peered out cautiously, curious and fearful. Crossing the rivers was impossible now. Bridges had disappeared beneath drifts, and the surface of the ice cracked under even the lightest pressure. The sound was muffled at first, a deep, rolling thrum, but then it could startle like thunder, a warning that beneath the frozen surface the current still pulsed. Animals adapted as best they could. Cattle huddled near the riverbank, avoiding the slick ice but seeking the faint warmth of ground less buried. Horses pawed at frozen grass near the water, their nostrils steaming in the icy air. Birds, when they dared leave shelter, landed in the barest patches, pecking quickly before the wind drove them to flight again. Inside the homes, the frozen river became a subject of fascination and caution. Children pressed their faces to frost-encrusted windows, trying to see its shape beneath the blizzard. Parents warned them gently, explaining that ice could be treacherous, that a single misstep could mean falling into water hidden beneath a deceptive layer of snow. The lessons were whispered carefully, a mixture of fear and wonder. Meals were eaten quietly, the aroma of coffee and stew mingling with the scent of damp wool and wood smoke. Hands were rubbed together constantly, toes tucked beneath layers, and eyes occasionally lifted to the windows to check the river, to see if the storm had shifted it, if some sign of life had returned. Each glance reminded them that the world outside had been transformed, that water and wind and snow now obeyed no familiar rules. The frozen river was more than a physical barrier. It was a reminder of isolation, of the landscape's quiet power, and of endurance. Families clung to the rhythm of stoves and lanterns, to small rituals of warmth and care, and to each other, knowing that even the coldest, most immobilized river could not touch the comfort they built inside. By the 8th day, exhaustion had begun to settle into every home. It was not a sudden, dramatic weariness, but a quiet, creeping fatigue that made movements slower, thoughts heavier, and voices softer. The storm outside had become a constant companion, and its unbroken presence seeped into the very bones of those trapped inside. Parents moved through daily tasks with deliberate care, stoking the stove, checking supplies, ladling soup, every motion measured, every gesture conserving energy. Their eyes held a quiet tension, alert to every groan of the house, every thump of snow falling from the roof, every whistle of wind pressing against walls. Sleep came fitfully, often broken by sudden drafts or dreams of being lost in the drifts. Children, despite the cold, found small ways to cope. They built forts from quilts and chairs, whispered imaginary stories to each other, or traced patterns in the frost on windows with tiny fingers. Even in their play there was a subdued caution, a recognition that the storm had changed the rules of their world. Laughter came, but softer, quieter, measured, like a spark in the dark rather than a fire. The air inside was heavy with mixed scents, burning wood, wet wool, simmering stew, and the faint tang of snow that had seeped through walls and crept beneath floors. Each smell carried with it memory and survival. The ordinary rituals of life transformed into acts of endurance. Every sip of coffee, every bite of food, every inhale of smoke-laden air became a moment to be savored, a small defiance against the storm's relentless power. Outside, the wind continued its endless song. Sometimes it screamed, sometimes it hummed, but it never stopped. The snow, sculpted by gusts into ridges and waves, created a world both beautiful and threatening, silent yet alive with the motion of 1,000 invisible hands reshaping the land. Occasionally, the drifts shifted with a low rumble, reminding those indoors that the plains were not merely buried, but being molded by forces far beyond human control. Even in exhaustion, hope lingered. A lantern's glow, a steaming bowl of stew, the warmth of another body nearby. All small lights against the vast white expanse outside. Families clung to these small comforts, knowing that endurance was itself a form of quiet heroism. By the 9th day, the storm had taken on a voice of its own. Beyond the howl and the whistle, there were subtle undertones, soft groans, deep thuds, and occasional sharp cracks that spoke of movement, of shifts in the snow, of the land's hidden labor beneath the white. It was as if the wind were not just air, but a living presence, whispering secrets through the ice and drifts. Families began to interpret these sounds, listening with careful attention. Was that the snow giving way on the barn roof? Or a tree bending too far, threatening to collapse? Some claimed to hear distant calls of other people, muffled and ghost-like, carried for a moment on the wind, before vanishing into silence. Children, nestled close to parents, would press their ears against the floorboards or windows, imagining worlds beyond their small rooms, other families, other homes, other struggles mirrored in the storm. Inside, warmth became ritual. Stoves were tended constantly, fires fed slowly, and kettles boiled water for tea, coffee, or porridge. The air was thick with comforting scents, burning pine, roasting potatoes, and the sharp, fresh tang of snow that had blown in through gaps in doors and window frames. Every sensory detail became amplified: the crackle of coals, the hiss of melting snow, the smell of damp wool drying on racks. Meals were quiet but deliberate. Bread was shared in measured slices. Soups, stretched thin, were savoured in small, comforting sips. Parents offered words of reassurance, softly spoken, their tones steady despite the tension pressing on every wall. Each act became a meditation in patience, a way to keep the mind calm while the body endured. Outside, the snow continued its endless dance. Drifts shifted constantly, forming new ridges and valleys, swallowing tracks, fences, and familiar markers of place. The plains were unrecognizable, an abstract landscape of white where even the most experienced eyes could lose their way. And always, the wind carried its whispers, a constant reminder that the storm was not only alive, but aware, shaping the world around those it enveloped. Even in this long, grey stretch, hope persisted, quiet, steadfast, a glow as steady as the lanterns flickering inside the small, resilient homes. Families clung to it, knowing that survival depended not only on warmth and food, but on belief in the light that still flickered beyond the walls of their shelter. By the 10th day, families began to notice a new pattern: the moments of calm between the wind's ferocious gusts. These pauses were brief, often lasting only a few minutes, but they carried a weight that was almost palpable. In the silence, the world outside seemed frozen mid-motion, as if the storm had momentarily drawn a breath. Inside, the quiet was both comforting and eerie. The rattling of windows ceased, the groan of the roof softened, and even the soft scuffling of animals paused. Children would tilt their heads toward the door or window, listening with wide eyes, imagining a world outside that was waiting, holding its breath along with them. Mothers and fathers took these moments to check on one another, smoothing blankets, brushing snow from hair, whispering words of reassurance that carried in the stillness. The smell of the home was a sanctuary. Smoke from the stove curled lazily into the air, mixing with the faint scent of damp wool and porridge simmering in pots. Each inhalation felt grounding, a reminder that though the plains outside were white and treacherous, there was warmth, nourishment, and care inside these walls. Fingers intertwined, hands held, small gestures that reinforced human connection in the midst of isolation. Outside, the silence was temporary. As soon as it ended, the wind returned with renewed fury, carrying needles of snow that bit at the skin and forced eyes to squint. Drifts shifted, sometimes collapsing with muffled thuds, reminding all inside that even when the storm seemed to pause, it was never gone. The plains were reshaping themselves constantly, erasing paths, hiding landmarks, and challenging anyone who dared to leave shelter. Yet the brief pauses offered hope. They were moments to breathe, to plan, to savor the fire's warmth a little longer, to share a quiet smile or whisper a prayer. Even the smallest gestures became profound, lighting a new candle, offering a sip of tea, tying a scarf tighter around a child's neck. Acts of endurance that were as much about spirit as survival. In those silent breaths, families found courage. They learned that survival was measured not only in warmth and food, but in patience, in noticing the world's small pauses and in clinging to the light, however faint, in the endless whiteness. By the 11th day, the storm had etched itself into memory. Every surface inside the home carried reminders. Frost clinging to window panes like delicate lace, icicles forming along the eaves, and the lingering scent of smoke and damp wool mingling with the faint tang of snow that had crept inside. Families began to speak softly of the past, stories of winters survived, of sunlit fields now buried, of neighbors and friends who had weathered storms before. Children listened intently, eyes wide and faces pressed against blankets, as parents recounted tales of courage and endurance. Each story was a lifeline, a thread connecting the past to the present, a reassurance that storms could be weathered and that warmth and safety could still exist, even in a world buried in white. Meals were taken slowly, with every bite deliberate. Bread, porridge, and thin soup were stretched as far as possible, each mouthful a reminder of resilience. Coffee and tea were savoured, the warmth seeping into chilled fingers and toes, a small comfort against the relentless cold outside. The wind outside continued its endless song, a symphony of howling gusts, shifting drifts, and distant crashes of collapsing snow. Each sound reminded those inside of the storm's power, but also of their own perseverance. Families checked on one another constantly, smoothing blankets, brushing hair free of frost, and whispering gentle words of encouragement that floated through the rooms like quiet prayers. Even the animals were part of these small rituals. Horses and cattle were given extra hay, their breaths steaming in the cold air of barns. Dogs were brushed and stroked, their fur frozen in places, but their spirits kept warm by human attention. Every act, no matter how small, became a statement of endurance and care, a reassurance that life persisted even in the harshest conditions. Frosted memories, shared quietly and gently, became a bridge between fear and hope. In the long white expanse beyond their walls, the storm raged on, but inside, families held on to warmth, connection, and the knowledge that they could endure. By the 12th day, the world outside had become almost entirely unrecognizable. Snow covered every familiar landmark, drifts rose higher than rooftops, and even the tallest trees seemed shrunken under the storm's weight. Inside, however, a small sanctuary had been carved by candlelight and stove warmth. Evening brought a gentle ritual. Families lit every available candle, the flames flickering and casting dancing shadows across walls and floors. The glow made the frost on windows sparkle like crystal, highlighting patterns of fern and feather etched by the relentless cold outside. Children sat close, mesmerized by the shifting lights, while parents moved quietly among them, feeding fires, ladling soup, or brushing snow from boots and coats. The air inside smelled of wax and smoke, mingled with simmering stew, warm bread, and the faint sweetness of molasses cookies baked before the storm. Each scent was a reminder of care and preparation, a thread of comfort against the relentless gusts pressing against the house. Sounds became part of the rhythm of survival, the crackle of the stove, the soft shuffle of feet across frozen floors, the whispered stories of mothers and fathers, and the gentle breathing of sleeping children all formed a cocoon of calm. Outside, the wind continued its ceaseless howl, but inside, the candlelight hour offered a momentary refuge, a place where the world's chaos could be held at bay. Families spoke softly, recalling sunny days of past summers, of crops growing tall, of streams running clear. Even in the coldest hours, laughter sometimes slipped through, a quiet, careful sound, fleeting but luminous, reminding everyone that joy could survive even in the storm's shadow. And as the candle flames swayed, reflecting in children's wide, bright eyes, there was a sense that despite the snow, the cold, and the endless white, life persisted. The storm could rage, but inside these homes warmth, hope, and love were steadfast. By the 13th day, families had begun to notice subtler sounds beneath the blizzard's roar, a whispering in the snow itself. Each gust carried a faint, almost musical undertone, a delicate sibilance that hinted at movement and life hidden beneath the drifts. Some likened it to voices speaking just out of reach, soft and distant, as though the snow were trying to tell a story of the plains it had buried. Children pressed their ears to the frosted windows, imagining what might lie beyond. Shapes appeared briefly, dark forms shifting, snow falling in curtains that hid everything, then gone before the eye could catch it. Parents watched over them, calm but attentive, guiding their curiosity gently, explaining that the storm had its own patterns and rhythms, its own secret life that humans could observe but never fully tame. Inside, warmth was a constant companion. Fires were tended carefully, flames lapping around logs, sending warmth that seeped into fingers, toes, and the backs of necks. Stew simmered slowly, its aroma mingling with the faint, metallic tang of snow carried in by the wind. Every sip, every bite, became an act of comfort, a reminder that life continued despite the storm's vastness outside. The house itself seemed to take on a life of its own. Floors creaked under weight, timbers groaned with the settling snow above, and shutters rattled softly. These sounds, once alarming, had become part of the rhythm, a heartbeat of endurance, a quiet acknowledgement of the storm's power and the human will to endure it. Even small moments became meaningful. A child laughing softly at the shadow of a flickering flame, a father humming a tune while brushing snow from a coat, a mother carefully knitting scarves for hands already numb from cold. All gestures became markers of hope, threads weaving together a tapestry of resilience. And outside, the whispering snow continued, ever present, reminding those inside that though the plains were buried, though the winds raged endlessly, the world was alive beneath the white, and life could still persist in patience, care, and warmth. By the 14th day, the hearth had become the heart of every home. Families gathered closer than ever, wrapping themselves in layers of wool, cotton, and quilted blankets, drawn together by the warmth that was both physical and emotional. The fire's glow danced across walls, casting long, soft shadows that shifted with the flicker of flames, making familiar furniture and faces seem otherworldly, yet comforting. The smell of burning wood mingled with simmering food, creating an atmosphere thick with reassurance. Potatoes roasted slowly, porridge bubbled gently, and coffee steamed in chipped mugs, sending spirals of warmth into the air. Even the faint scent of melting snow seeping through cracks reminded everyone that the world outside continued, relentless yet distant. Children sat cross-legged on the floor, tracing fingers along patterns in frost on the windows, imagining shapes, a horse galloping through the snow, a bird perched on a buried fence, a neighbor trudging along a hidden path. Parents watched them, smiling softly, whispering stories to keep fear at bay, guiding their imaginations gently, allowing wonder to coexist with caution. The wind continued its endless song outside, but inside the sound was softened to a distant, constant hum. Sometimes it surged, rattling shutters and shaking timbers, and sometimes it paused, leaving only silence that felt fragile and precious. Each surge reminded those inside of the storm's power, yet each pause allowed them to breathe, to rest, and to gather strength for the next push. Even small acts became significant. Hands were rubbed together for warmth, blankets adjusted, hair brushed free of frost, tea poured and shared. Every gesture reinforced the quiet message. Life continues, even under extreme conditions, and warmth, both human and fireborn, is a force that can endure the coldest days. In the hearth's glow, with shadows flickering and smells of warmth filling the rooms, families found a fragile but persistent sense of peace. Though the storm raged endlessly outside, within these walls there was comfort, hope, and the steady pulse of survival. By the 15th day, the endless expanse of snow outside had taken on a strange beauty, even in its menace. Drifts rose like rolling hills, their surfaces smooth and glistening with the faint sparkle of ice crystals, catching whatever grey light filtered through the storm clouds. Fences, trees, and buildings peeked occasionally from beneath thick layers, transformed into abstract shapes that made the world look almost otherworldly. Families gazed through frost-laced windows, tracing these altered landscapes with their eyes. Each shadowed ridge and sunken valley told a story of the wind's power, of drifts shaped over hours into temporary sculptures. Children imagined figures moving beneath the snow, perhaps neighbors, perhaps animals, while parents spoke softly, guiding curiosity and tempering fear, reminding them that some mysteries of the storm were better left unseen. Inside, warmth remained a constant sanctuary. Fires burned steadily, their flames reflecting off polished pots and cast-iron pans. The air smelled of roasted root vegetables, damp wool, and the faint tang of melting snow on window ledges. Every sound, the crackle of logs, the soft footsteps of family members, the hum of conversation, formed a gentle rhythm, a heartbeat against the vast white silence outside. Meals were simple but nourishing, eaten slowly, with attention to every bite. Bread was rationed, soup ladled carefully into bowls, and coffee sipped deliberately, warmth traveling slowly into fingers and toes. Each act, however ordinary, became a ritual of endurance, a way to assert life in a landscape that seemed intent on erasure. Evenings were spent in quiet reflection. Families huddled together near the stove or hearth, telling stories of past winters, of sunny fields now hidden, of neighbors whose presence had become abstract through isolation. Children listened with wide eyes, absorbing both fear and wonder, learning that survival was as much about patience and hope as it was about warmth and food. Outside, the wind continued its relentless reshaping of the plains, but for those inside, snow-covered horizons became less frightening and more a canvas for imagination, a reminder that even in desolation there is beauty, and even in hardship there is the enduring pulse of life. By the 16th day, every movement outside became a cautious venture. Snow had grown so deep and treacherous that even the briefest journey left a trace, a single line of footprints swallowed gradually by the restless wind. Families who dared to step beyond their doors did so with care, each step deliberate, boots crunching in rhythms that seemed almost ceremonial against the vast, white expanse. The sound of snow underfoot was muffled yet oddly sharp in the stillness of the blizzard. Each step carried echoes, bouncing faintly against drifts, against barns half buried, and against the skeletal shapes of trees bowed beneath the weight of ice. Occasionally the wind would rise suddenly, erasing these footprints almost immediately, leaving the landscape pristine again and reminding travelers of the storm's relentless dominance. Inside, warmth and routine remained anchors. Stoves were tended carefully, flames licking logs with steady persistence. The smell of simmering soups and freshly baked bread mingled with the faint metallic scent of snow carried in by boots and clothing. Families moved quietly, their steps careful on frozen floors, whispering softly, maintaining a rhythm that mirrored the hushed, deliberate pace of life outside. Children often pressed faces to frosted windows, imagining themselves tracing the footprints of invisible neighbors or animals across the plains. Their minds transformed the storm into a world of mystery and adventure, where hidden paths and secret journeys existed beneath the unbroken white. Parents encouraged these flights of imagination, their voices soft and steady, guiding the children gently, allowing wonder to coexist with caution. Even animals adapted. Horses pawed at frozen ground, testing each step, while cows huddled close for warmth, breaths fogging the cold air of barns. Dogs sniffed and circled cautiously, their fur rimed with frost, their bodies alert yet trusting in human care. Every creature moved with deliberate intent, guided by instinct and the quiet encouragement of those sheltering with them. Footsteps in the drift, fleeting and fragile, became symbols of connection and persistence. Though the storm threatened to erase everything, each mark left behind told a story of endurance, of life continuing even when the world seemed buried and infinite. By the 17th day, the storm had transformed the Great Plains into a landscape of hidden voices. The wind carried sounds that were almost imperceptible, creaking branches, shifting drifts, the faint rumble of distant snow collapsing, creating an orchestra of muted life beneath the white. Families learned to listen closely, interpreting the whispers as messages from the land itself, reminders that even buried, the world remained alive. Children pressed close to windows, their breath fogging the glass, imagining shapes moving under the snow. A dark blur might be a neighbor checking a roof, or a deer trudging through drifts. A sudden crack could signal a falling branch, or the shifting of a hidden snowbank. Parents watched silently, offering calm explanations and quiet reassurances, teaching their children the patience to observe and the wisdom to respect the storm's unseen power. Inside, warmth became ritualized. Fires burned steadily, their crackle a comforting companion against the blizzard's endless howl. Kettles steamed, the aroma of simmering soup filling every corner. Blankets and quilts were adjusted, hats and mittens dried by stoves, and hands were clasped together to share warmth. Every touch, every careful movement was an act of endurance and care, reinforcing bonds that strengthened against isolation. Meals were eaten slowly, deliberately, each bite a reminder of survival. Coffee or tea offered more than warmth. It became a moment of reflection, a pause to breathe in the small comforts of home. Children chewed quietly, eyes occasionally drifting to the frosted window panes, imagining the hidden world beyond the white veil. Even animals became attuned to these hidden voices. Horses lifted heads and pricked ears at distant groans of ice. Cows huddled closer in stalls, and dogs paced or whimpered softly, sensing changes invisible to human eyes. Every creature moved with caution and patience, relying on instinct and human care to navigate a landscape entirely transformed. The storm, relentless and omnipresent, was no longer merely a force to endure. It had become a companion of sorts, a teacher showing that observation, patience and care were as vital as fire and food. And as families listened to the hidden voices of the prairie, they felt a quiet harmony with the world outside, even as it remained buried under endless snow. By the 18th day, the world outside had been transformed into a landscape behind an icy veil. Windows were thick with frost, icicles hung like delicate chandeliers from eaves, and every familiar shape was softened, blurred, or erased beneath the relentless snow. Families looked out through this frozen screen, seeing only muted shadows of what had once been home, fields, and roads. The wind pressed continuously against the houses, rattling shutters and whistling through cracks, creating patterns of sound that seemed almost musical. Children pressed their noses against glass, trying to see past the ice, tracing fern-like patterns with small fingers. Their imaginations ran wild, transforming the frozen veil into castles, forests, and hidden worlds beneath the snow. Parents smiled softly, guiding curiosity while teaching caution, explaining that the veil was beautiful but powerful, a reminder of nature's strength. Inside, the hearth remained a sanctuary. Fires burned steadily, casting flickering light that reflected off the icy patterns, turning frost into a shimmering display. The smell of burning wood mingled with simmering stew, coffee, and the faint tang of snow that had found its way inside, creating an atmosphere of warmth and endurance. Every sound, the crackle of flames, the soft shuffle of feet, the whispered conversations, formed a gentle rhythm, grounding those within in a world still alive despite isolation. Meals were taken with careful attention. Bread was sliced slowly, soup ladled with measured hands, coffee or tea sipped in long, deliberate moments. These small routines became rituals of reassurance, anchoring families in the steadiness of life, even as the world beyond the icy veil remained unpredictable and harsh. Animals, too, adapted to the icy landscape. Horses pressed into barns, their breaths fogging the cold air. Cows huddled closer, and dogs circled carefully, ears pricked and bodies tense. Each movement was deliberate, a silent conversation with the frozen world around them, guided by instinct and human care alike. The icy veil, beautiful and threatening, framed a world transformed by snow. Yet inside, families clung to warmth, ritual, and connection, learning that even when the outside was obscured and unrecognizable, life, hope, and human resilience could still shine brightly through the frost. By the 19th day, the storm had left its mark on every surface, and roofs bore the weight of endless snow and ice. From inside, families listened to the subtle sounds above, the soft groan of timber under pressure, the occasional sharp snap of ice breaking free, and the whisper of snow shifting across shingles. These sounds, once alarming, had become part of the rhythm of survival, a reminder of the storm's persistence and the delicate balance of shelter and exposure. Parents moved with caution, checking attics and rafters, shoveling snow where possible, and reinforcing weak points. The air inside was filled with the comforting smell of burning wood, and the faint metallic tang of melting snow seeping through cracks. Every careful motion, placing logs, adjusting blankets, tending to children, was both practical and calming, a way to assert control in a world dominated by the storm. Children watched and listened, their curiosity tempered by guidance. They pressed fingers to frosted windows, imagining the roof as a great white hill with tiny figures, neighbors, animals, or imagined heroes trudging across its surface. Parents told gentle stories to transform fear into wonder, weaving lessons of patience, care, and endurance into their tales. Meals continued to be simple and deliberate. Soup was stirred slowly, bread broken into small pieces, coffee sipped with intention. Each act became a meditation, a way to focus on warmth, nourishment, and the continuity of life within the home. Outside, the wind roared relentlessly, but inside, the whispering roof became a companion, not an enemy. Families learned to interpret its sounds, to anticipate the settling of snow, to appreciate the resilience of the shelter that kept them safe. Even in the storm's longest stretches, these quiet lessons reinforced hope that preparation, care, and attention could endure the coldest days, and that life persisted in small, steady ways amidst the blizzard's might. By the 20th day, the blizzard had become a world unto itself. Outside, snowflakes moved in swirling, chaotic patterns, dancing in the wind like tiny, frozen dancers, each unique, each fleeting. The plains had vanished beneath a living sea of white, the horizon erased, and every object outside softened and reshaped by the storm's relentless motion. Families watched through frosted windows, mesmerized by the intricate ballet beyond. Children pressed faces to glass, tracing the flurries with tiny fingers, imagining magical creatures riding the currents of wind and ice. Parents joined in the quiet fascination, telling gentle stories of snow sprites and winter spirits, weaving calm and wonder into the moments between gusts. Inside, warmth became more than survival. It was ritual, a slow, meditative practice. Fires burned steadily, crackling softly, while kettles steamed and the aroma of roasting root vegetables mingled with the subtle tang of snow that had crept inside. Every sensory detail became an anchor, the glow of flames reflected in eyes, the soft rustle of blankets, the comforting taste of coffee and soup. Meals were deliberate and slow, each bite and sip savoured. Bread was broken with care, soup ladled into bowls with measured hands, and children encouraged to eat mindfully, feeling the warmth seep into fingers and toes. Even small gestures, adjusting a blanket, tying a scarf, smoothing hair, became profound acts of endurance and connection. Outside, the snow danced tirelessly, reshaping the landscape with every passing moment. Yet inside, families found stillness and peace. The rhythm of fire, meal, and story became a sanctuary against the blizzard's chaos, a gentle reminder that even amid relentless storms, calm, comfort, and hope could persist. By the 21st day, families had become attuned to the subtle, unique smells of the winter storm. Beyond the warmth of burning wood and simmering food, there was a fainting, crisp aroma of snow seeping through cracks, fresh, metallic, and almost electric. It mingled with the scent of wet wool, earth pressed beneath layers of frost, and the lingering aroma of dried herbs and coffee, creating a tapestry of smells that anchored the household amidst isolation. Children noticed these scents with wonder, inhaling deeply, imagining the frozen world outside. Snow-laden trees, icy streams, and the silent plains stretching endlessly under a pale sky. Parents guided these moments, whispering stories of past winters, of adventures and lessons learned, of resilience and hope, turning sensory awareness into gentle meditation. Inside, the fire remained the heart of the home. Flames flickered softly, casting golden light across walls and floorboards, reflecting in steaming mugs and polished pans. The hiss of water in kettles, the gentle clink of spoons against bowls, and the soft shuffle of feet on frozen floors formed a soothing rhythm, harmonizing with the occasional groan of the house under snow's relentless weight. Meals were eaten slowly, each bite a small affirmation of life. Bread, soup, and coffee were savored, the warmth filling both body and spirit. Even small gestures, brushing snow from clothing, smoothing blankets, or stroking an animal's fur, became acts of care and endurance, reinforcing connection and presence in a world reshaped by the blizzard. Outside, the storm raged tirelessly, but the sense inside reminded families that life endured. Every inhalation, every aroma became a tether to home, warmth, and hope. In these small, intimate moments, the endless white became less daunting, and the long winter day, though harsh, held a quiet beauty and continuity that could be felt deeply and safely from within. By the 22nd day, families had settled into a subtle, steady rhythm of survival. Each day unfolded with quiet precision, checking fires, stirring soups, tending animals, adjusting blankets, and sharing moments of gentle conversation. The blizzard outside continued its relentless work, but inside life followed a measured cadence, a soothing pattern that anchored hope and calm. Children learned the rhythm naturally, watching parents and older siblings move with deliberate care. Their small hands helped stir a pot, fold laundry, or carry logs from one corner to the hearth. Each task, though simple, became part of a ritual of endurance, a quiet meditation of motion, sound, and warmth. The air was rich with comforting scents, the smoky aroma of burning wood, the sweet earthiness of root vegetables roasting, and the faint, sharp tang of snow carried in through doors and cracks. Every inhalation grounded those inside, connecting them to warmth and presence, even as the wind screamed beyond walls. Meals continued with mindful slowness. Bread was torn carefully, soup ladled with measured hands, and coffee or tea sipped with intention. These moments were more than nourishment. They were affirmation, gentle reminders that life persisted, and that patience, attention, and care could transform even the harshest storm into a manageable, rhythmic passage. Animals adapted to this rhythm as well. Horses and cows adjusted their movements to conserve energy. Dogs paced or rested, ears pricked for signs of change. Each creature mirrored the household's measured pace, reinforcing the quiet order that allowed life to endure. Evenings were marked by small celebrations, a shared story, a whispered memory, or a song hummed softly by a parent. These gentle rituals stitched the family together, creating comfort against the blizzard's chaos and instilling the profound lesson that endurance is built as much in quiet routine as in courage or action. By the 23rd day, the frost on the windows had thickened into intricate patterns, as if the storm itself had become an artist. Feathery swirls and crystalline ferns traced every pane, catching the dim light and transforming ordinary glass into delicate, sparkling tapestries. Children pressed their noses and fingertips to these icy masterpieces, tracing the lines and imagining worlds hidden within each frost pattern. Parents watched quietly, sipping coffee or stirring a pot of stew, their attention gentle but vigilant. They whispered soft stories to accompany the frost, tales of snow sprites dancing at night, of hidden paths beneath drifts, of distant neighbors silently enduring the storm. Every story was slow, deliberate, and soothing, meant to wrap the listeners in calm as the storm raged beyond the glass. Inside, the hearth burned steadily, casting flickering golden light that highlighted the frost's beauty. The air carried a mixture of smells, the sharp bite of melting snow, the warm aroma of bread baking, the earthy scent of root vegetables roasting, and the comforting smoke of burning wood. Each scent became an anchor, a reminder that life continued despite the white wilderness outside. Meals were quiet rituals, eaten with care. Bread was torn slowly, soup sipped in deliberate pauses, coffee savored as heat spread through chilled hands. Even small gestures, folding blankets, brushing snow from hair, stroking the fur of a faithful dog, took on profound meaning, acts of presence and endurance in a world temporarily suspended by ice and wind. Outside, the blizzard continued its tireless work, shaping the landscape into an abstract, unrecognizable expanse. But the frost on the windows reminded families that beauty could exist even in hardship, and that patience and observation could transform fear into wonder. In these quiet, golden-lit rooms, life persisted, gentle and resilient, like the patterns etched forever in ice. By the 24th day, families had settled into a deep, almost meditative vigilance. Every creak of the house, every whistle of the wind, and every soft thump of snow from the roof was noticed, observed, and understood. It was a quiet watch, not born of fear, but of respect for the storm, for the plains, and for the fragile life sustained within the walls of each home. Parents moved with deliberate calm, tending fires and kettles, checking supplies, and adjusting quilts. The air was dense with comforting scents, burning wood curling into the corners, soup simmering softly, and the faint metallic tang of snow filtering in through doors and window cracks. Every sound, the crackle of logs, the soft shuffle of boots, the low hum of whispered conversation, created a rhythm of safety and reassurance. Children participated in the quiet watch, their curiosity guided by gentle hands. They traced frost patterns on windows, imagined tiny creatures scuttling beneath the snow, or whispered to siblings, their voices blending with the muted hum of the house. Parents encouraged observation and reflection, teaching patience, attention, and care, lessons that would carry beyond the storm. Meals continued as slow rituals, bread torn carefully, soup sipped deliberately, and coffee or tea savored with each hand-warming sip. Each act, simple yet intentional, reinforced the continuity of life and the steady heartbeat of family togetherness. Animals mirrored this calm vigilance. Horses stood quietly in barns, ears twitching at distant sounds. Cows huddled for warmth, and dogs padded softly, alert but composed. Every movement reflected an understanding of the storm's power and the careful pacing needed to endure it. And through it all, families found a strange comfort in the quiet watch. The blizzard's fury could not erase the rhythm of survival, the warmth of the hearth, or the gentle bond of shared care. In this measured, attentive state, the storm became less a force of chaos and more a backdrop against which life continued, patient, observant, and enduring. By the 25th day, rooftops had become landscapes of their own, draped in heavy snow and thick ice that glimmered faintly in the pale daylight. Each ridge and slope told a story of the storm's persistence, bending and shaping every structure beneath its relentless weight. The rooftops, once ordinary, now appeared as sculpted white waves, silent witnesses to the blizzard's slow, tireless artistry. From inside, families watched through frost-encrusted windows, imagining the snow as a vast ocean frozen mid-motion. Children pressed palms and noses to the glass, tracing shapes, making shadowy figures dance with their imagination. Parents, quietly tending fires and meals, whispered gentle tales to guide wonder and calm curiosity, turning apprehension into fascination. The hearth remained the heart of the home. Flames flickered steadily, their glow reflecting off polished pots, steaming bowls, and the frost patterns on windows. The air was rich with layered scents, the warm smokiness of burning wood, the sweet earthiness of roasted vegetables, and the crisp, almost electric tang of snow pressed against window panes. Every breath became an anchor, a reminder of life persisting despite the storm's weight. Meals were shared slowly and deliberately, each bite of bread, sip of soup, or taste of coffee infused with mindfulness. Simple acts of care, brushing snow from clothing, tying scarves snugly around children's necks, smoothing fur on animals, were imbued with significance, forming a web of warmth and connection that countered the blizzard's isolation. Outside, wind sculpted the rooftops constantly, drifting snow into peaks and valleys, reshaping what had been carefully built. Yet inside, families felt a quiet triumph in observing, enduring, and protecting one another. The frost-laden roofs became symbols of patience and resilience, visible reminders that the storm, though powerful, could not extinguish life, warmth, or hope. By the 26th day, families had learned to find meaning in the sound of stillness between the storm's roars. These quiet moments were rare and precious, brief lapses in the wind's fury where the world seemed paused, suspended in white silence. In those intervals, the house itself seemed to breathe, timbers settling gently under the snow's weight, floorboards sighing as if exhaling along with the people within. Children listened closely, their wide eyes reflecting the soft glow of the hearth. They traced frost patterns with fingers, whispered imagined stories, or simply rested against parents, absorbing the calm. Parents responded with soft smiles, gentle touches, and quiet conversation, transforming stillness into comfort and security, teaching that peace could exist even amid relentless chaos. The hearth's warmth wrapped the household in gentle heat. Fires flickered with soft crackles, mingling with the faint hiss of melting snow on window ledges and the comforting aroma of stew, bread, and coffee. Every sound became a part of the rhythm of life, the shuffle of feet, the gentle brush of hands over blankets, the low murmur of family voices, a symphony of endurance against the blizzard's white backdrop. Meals were slower than ever, each bite and sip savored for its warmth and sustenance. Children were encouraged to notice textures and flavors, the crisp crust of bread, the earthy sweetness of root vegetables, the comforting bitterness of coffee or tea. Even the smallest gestures, handing a mug, smoothing hair free of frost, stroking an animal's fur, became acts of care and connection, binding the household together against the storm's isolation. Outside, wind and snow remained omnipresent, but in these brief intervals of stillness, families could breathe. They felt a subtle shift in mood, a reassurance that endurance carried meaning, that life continued, and that hope persisted, even when hidden beneath layers of ice and white. The sound of stillness, fragile and fleeting, became a lullaby, a gentle reminder that calm could exist within the storm's unyielding embrace. By the 27th day, families had begun to recognize the subtle shifts in the snow that hinted at hidden paths across the plains. Drifts, wind-sculpted and constantly moving, sometimes created shallow channels or faint ridges that suggested where a fence line or a road might lie beneath the white. Observing these patterns became both practical and mesmerizing, a quiet study of the land's slow transformation. Children pressed their faces to frosted windows, imagining figures carefully navigating these hidden paths, neighbors delivering supplies, deer moving silently, or even playful snow spirits riding the wind. Parents explained what was safe to imagine and what required caution, guiding their children gently, turning curiosity into mindful observation rather than fear. Inside, warmth remained the anchor of each day. Fires crackled steadily, the golden light reflecting off metal pans, glass mugs, and frost-laced window panes. The air was thick with layered scents, roasting root vegetables, the faint sweetness of dried herbs, the sharp tang of melting snow, and the comforting smoke of wood fires. Every inhalation carried both reassurance and grounding, a tactile reminder of life thriving in the midst of isolation. Meals were deliberate, small ceremonies of care. Bread was broken slowly, soup ladled with measured attention, and coffee or tea sipped with full awareness of its warmth. Each action reinforced the rhythm of daily life and the resilience of the household, transforming ordinary tasks into affirmations of endurance. Even animals sensed the hidden paths. Horses shifted cautiously in barns, cows pressed closer together for warmth, and dogs padded silently, ears alert for subtle signs in the wind. Their movements mirrored the careful human navigation, creating a shared rhythm of observation, patience, and quiet respect for the storm's hidden patterns. The hidden paths, fleeting and ephemeral, reminded families that even in a world covered in endless white, there were directions, possibilities, and continuity. Life, patience, and care could carve roots through the most daunting of circumstances, and each small discovery became a quiet triumph against the blizzard's relentless dominance. By the 28th day, the blizzard outside had reached a nearly constant intensity, and families relied heavily on the soft, steady glow of lanterns to guide their evenings. Each lantern, whether hanging from a hook or resting on a table, cast a warm circle of light that contrasted the cold, monochrome world beyond the windows. Shadows danced on walls and ceilings, creating a gentle, living tapestry that shifted as flames flickered and wavered. Children gravitated toward these glowing orbs, mesmerized by the moving shadows and the comfort of warm light. Parents encouraged them to trace the flickering patterns with their eyes, to let imagination fill in stories of hidden worlds, tiny creatures, or distant neighbors navigating the snow. These moments became nightly rituals, grounding children and adults alike in a sense of continuity and safety. Inside, the air was thick with comforting scents, the smokiness of burning wood, the earthy sweetness of root vegetables roasting in the oven, and the faint metallic tang of snow seeping in through small cracks. Each inhalation offered reassurance, a reminder of warmth and life persisting in the midst of relentless white. Meals were shared slowly under the lantern light, each bite and sip deliberate. Bread was broken gently, soup ladled carefully, and coffee or tea sipped with attention to its comforting heat. Even small gestures, wrapping a child in a blanket, brushing frost from a dog's fur, tying scarves snugly, took on profound significance, weaving human connection into the rhythm of survival. Outside, the blizzard continued to rage, white waves shifting and reshaping the landscape. Yet inside, the soft glow of lanterns provided both literal and metaphorical illumination, casting light on family bonds, warmth, and hope. The gentle flicker reminded everyone that even in the deepest storm, a small light could guide the way, offering both comfort and courage to endure another day. By the 29th day, the wind outside had become more than a force. It was a constant, living presence, its voice weaving through every crevice, bending every tree, and shaping every drift. Families began to listen to it not only as a threat, but as a hauntingly beautiful song, low howls interspersed with high whistles, surging gusts followed by soft sighs, a melody both wild and strangely comforting. Children pressed ears against frosted windows, eyes wide, imagining the wind as a messenger carrying tales from distant towns or stories of creatures moving unseen beneath the snow. Parents guided these musings, whispering gentle tales that matched the wind's cadence, stories of courage, survival, and hope, so that even the blizzard's voice became a lullaby, a rhythm to soothe and calm. Inside, warmth persisted as the anchor of life. Fires burned steadily, casting golden light that flickered against frost-lined windows and polished surfaces. The aroma of simmering soup, roasting root vegetables, and faintly smoked wood filled the rooms, each scent reinforcing a sense of comfort and endurance. Every sound, the crackle of flames, soft footsteps, the murmur of conversation, blended with the wind's distant song to form a symphony of survival. Meals were taken with deliberate slowness, each bite a meditation. Bread was torn carefully, soup savored, and coffee or tea sipped with attention to its warmth. Small gestures, adjusting blankets, smoothing hair, or brushing an animal's fur became acts of mindfulness, grounding everyone in the present moment and connecting them to one another. Even animals seemed to respond to the wind's song. Horses shifted in stalls with quiet grace, cows huddled in measured clusters, and dogs padded softly, ears pricked, moving in rhythm with the household's careful steps. Together, humans and animals formed a living chorus, attuned to the storm's persistent melody, finding both caution and comfort in its presence. The song of the wind, wild and continuous, became a companion rather than an adversary. Families felt its rhythm and allowed it to guide their calm, patience, and resilience, knowing that even amidst relentless snow and ice, life endured, and with attentiveness and care, hope persisted. By the 30th day, what had once been lively gardens were now entirely hidden beneath snow and ice. Flower beds, vegetable patches, and hedges were transformed into soft white mounds, delicate frost tracing each branch and stem with silvery precision. From inside, families gazed through windows, marveling at the way winter had reshaped familiar spaces into quiet sculptures of stillness and beauty. Children pressed their palms and noses to frosted glass, imagining the garden beneath, the roots holding tightly in frozen soil, tiny animals burrowing for warmth, and snowflakes settling like a soft blanket over every hidden bloom. Parents offered quiet stories, telling of seeds sleeping underground, waiting for the sun and spring to return, weaving patience and hope into these moments of observation. Inside, warmth wrapped around everyone. Fires crackled steadily, casting soft golden light across walls and floorboards. The scent of burning wood mingled with the rich aroma of simmering stews, freshly baked bread, and faint traces of snow carried in on boots and clothing. Each inhale reminded everyone of life persisting, grounded in care, warmth, and shared presence. Meals became gentle rituals, savored slowly. Bread was torn with intention, soup sipped deliberately, and coffee or tea enjoyed for both warmth and comfort. Small acts of care, tucking blankets around shoulders, brushing frost from hair, stroking an animal's fur, formed a tapestry of connection, creating security and calm amid the storm's isolation. Even animals adapted quietly. Horses pawed gently in barns, cows huddled together for warmth, and dogs padded softly, alert to the household's rhythm. Their movements mirrored the careful attentiveness of the humans, reinforcing the balance of observation, patience, and care. The frosted garden, silent and frozen, became a symbol of resilience and quiet beauty. Though life outside was obscured, families found comfort in observing, imagining, and tending to their homes, learning that even under heavy snow, hope and life endured beneath the surface, patiently waiting for the warmth of spring to return. By the 31st day, the house itself seemed to take on a personality, alive with subtle sounds and rhythms that spoke of endurance. The floorboards groaned softly as family members moved about. Logs shifted in the hearth with gentle crackles, and the faint drip of melting snow from the eaves created a quiet, soothing percussion. This gentle hum became the heartbeat of daily life, a constant reassurance that the world inside remained steadfast despite the storm outside. Children lay on rugs near the fire, listening to the house's quiet symphony, tracing patterns in the frost on windows or whispering imagined stories. Parents moved deliberately, tending stoves, stirring pots, adjusting quilts, and checking on animals, all while maintaining a serene, steady presence. Their calm energy infused the space, teaching the younger ones that patience and care could transform even the harshest days into moments of safety and comfort. The air inside was layered with scents that carried a sense of home, the smoky aroma of firewood, the earthy sweetness of roasted vegetables, the subtle warmth of bread baking, and the crisp tang of snow filtering in through tiny cracks. Each inhalation grounded the family, connecting them to warmth, sustenance, and life persisting amid the white expanse outside. Meals remained deliberate rituals. Bread was broken slowly, soup ladled carefully into bowls, and coffee or tea sipped with mindful attention to warmth. Every touch, folding blankets, brushing hair free of frost, stroking the fur of a horse or dog, was an act of presence, care, and quiet resilience, reinforcing the bonds that weathered the storm alongside them. Even the animals adapted to this rhythm. Horses shifted softly in stalls, cows huddled for warmth, and dogs padded gently across the floor, all contributing to the house's subtle symphony of survival. Together, humans and animals moved with deliberate, patient care, creating a sanctuary within the storm's unyielding power. The gentle hum of the house, alive with warmth and motion, became a lullaby of endurance. Within its walls, families found peace, comfort, and hope, a quiet reminder that even as the blizzard raged beyond, life connection and resilience persisted, steady and enduring. By the 32nd day, the hearth had become more than a source of warmth. It was the hidden heart of the home. Families gathered closely around it, wrapping themselves in layers of blankets and quilts, allowing the fire's golden glow to illuminate faces, walls, and frost-laced windows. Each flicker of flame seemed to breathe life into the room, softening shadows and creating a cocoon of comfort against the blizzard's relentless howl. Children sat cross-legged, tracing patterns in the frost on windows or gently poking at logs, fascinated by the tiny sparks that leapt into the air. Parents encouraged these quiet explorations, offering gentle stories of warmth and courage, guiding imagination and calm curiosity in equal measure. The fire's presence became both literal and symbolic, a beacon of endurance, patience, and quiet resilience. The air was rich with layered scents, smoky wood, earthy root vegetables roasting slowly, the faint sweetness of bread, and the sharp, clean tang of snow seeping in through cracks. Each inhale grounded the family in the present, a sensory affirmation that life, safety, and warmth persisted even as the storm reshaped the world outside. Meals were taken with mindful slowness. Soup was ladled with care, bread torn deliberately, and coffee or tea sipped to savor warmth and comfort. Small gestures, tucking blankets, brushing frost from hair, smoothing an animal's fur, became acts of attentiveness and connection, weaving reassurance through every corner of the home. Outside, snow continued to drift and swirl, reshaping the plains and rooflines. Yet inside, the hearth's glow created a sanctuary where life, hope, and human connection flourished. It was a hidden center of calm, a reminder that even in the harshest winter, warmth and care could illuminate the world, one flickering flame at a time. By the 33rd day, the quality of light had changed. The sun, low in the sky and filtered through thick clouds, cast a muted, silvery glow over the snow-covered plains. Even inside, this pale light seeped through frosted windows, mingling with the golden flicker of the hearth and lanterns to create a soft, layered illumination that felt both calming and mysterious. Children watched the shifting interplay of light and shadow with fascination, imagining shapes and stories dancing across walls, floorboards, and frost patterns. Parents guided their curiosity gently, encouraging observation while sharing soft tales of winter landscapes, hidden creatures, and resilient neighbors navigating the storm. Each story wove calm, patience, and hope into the moments, turning fleeting light into an anchor of imagination and serenity. The air inside was thick with comforting scents, the smoky warmth of the fire, the earthy sweetness of root vegetables roasting slowly, the faint tang of snow pressed against windows, and the subtle aroma of fresh bread. Each inhalation became a grounding ritual, connecting family members to life, warmth, and the steady continuity of daily rhythms. Meals were deliberate, slow, and meditative. Bread was broken carefully, soup ladled with attention, and coffee or tea sipped for both warmth and comfort. Small gestures, smoothing blankets, brushing snow from clothing, stroking an animal's fur, became profound acts of connection, reinforcing the sense of home and security even as the storm raged beyond. Animals adapted to the shifting light as well. Horses adjusted their posture in barns, cows huddled closely, and dogs padded softly, moving with careful attentiveness. Together, humans and animals experienced the subtle changes of day, finding reassurance in rhythm, light, and shared warmth. The shifting light, fragile and fleeting, became a quiet companion to the household. Even as the blizzard reshaped the world outside, inside there was a sense of continuity, calm, and resilience, a gentle reminder that life, hope, and patience could persist illuminated by both fire and the subtle glow of winter's muted sun. By the 34th day, the sheer weight of the snow was evident everywhere. Roofs bowed slightly under the accumulation, fences disappeared beneath drifts, and every tree branch sagged, heavy with ice and frozen snow. Families became acutely aware of this weight, moving with careful deliberation whenever they ventured outside or tended to structural concerns, balancing caution with necessity. Inside, the house offered warmth and protection from the pressing burden of the storm. Fires burned steadily, casting dancing shadows across walls and ceilings, and the air was rich with comforting scents, the smoky aroma of wood, the subtle sweetness of baking bread, and the savory richness of simmering stews. Even the faint metallic tang of snow creeping through tiny cracks served as a reminder that life persisted, fragile yet resilient. Children listened to the soft groans of timbers and the occasional crack of ice, interpreting these sounds with curiosity rather than fear. Parents encouraged them to see strength and adaptability in the home's response, weaving calm and reassurance into their observations. Each sound became part of the household's rhythm, a reminder that patience, vigilance, and care could transform pressure into endurance. Meals continued with deliberate slowness, bread was broken with care, soup savored with mindful attention, and coffee or tea sipped to warm, chilled hands. Every small gesture, folding blankets, brushing snow from clothing, stroking an animal's fur, became an act of connection, reinforcing safety and presence amidst the storm's formidable weight. Outside, snow continued to pile, reshaping the landscape and challenging movement. But inside, families found balance, rhythm, and quiet strength. The weight of snow, though daunting, became a lesson in resilience, a gentle reminder that patience, care, and shared warmth could support life even under the heaviest burden. By the 35th day, nightfall brought a new, gentle rhythm to the storm. The wind softened in intermittent gusts, the snowflakes moved more slowly, and a hushed stillness settled over the plains. Families listened closely to the whisper of night, the distant sighs of snow shifting, the quiet groan of icy branches, and the faint drip of melting frost, sounds that carried both mystery and comfort in the deep hours. Children sat near the hearth, eyes half-lidded in drowsy fascination, tracing frost patterns on windows or imagining tiny creatures moving silently beneath the snow. Parents spoke in gentle, measured tones, telling soft stories of winter's secrets, of hidden trails and brave neighbors, of endurance and hope. Every whispered word and pause became a lullaby, coaxing calm and reflection as the world outside seemed suspended in white silence. The hearth's warmth radiated gently through rooms, fires flickered and crackled, mingling with the subtle aromas of roasted vegetables, bread baking, and the lingering metallic freshness of snow. Each breath carried reassurance, grounding families in warmth and presence, even as night deepened and the storm's power persisted beyond the walls. Meals were taken with quiet care, though by nightfall they were lighter. Small portions of bread, sips of warm soup or coffee, shared slowly and mindfully. Every gesture, tucking blankets, brushing snow from hair, stroking a faithful dog, was imbued with intention, connecting the family and animals in a shared rhythm of comfort and protection. Even the animals responded to night's hush. Horses shifted quietly in stalls, cows huddled in silence, and dogs padded softly, attentive yet relaxed. Together, humans and animals embraced the whisper of night, finding solace in the storm's softer voice and reassurance in the shared warmth and steady heartbeat of home. The whisper of night became a gentle lullaby, a reminder that even in relentless winter, calm could be found, hope could endure, and life, patient and resilient, continued quietly beneath the white expanse. By the 36th day, the world outside had become an endless stretch of frosted horizons. Fields, roads, and fences were hidden beneath soft waves of snow, each drift sculpted by the wind into smooth, flowing contours. The sun, pale and distant, barely penetrated the thick clouds, casting a silvery blue glow over everything it touched, transforming the familiar plains into a realm of quiet wonder. From inside, families gazed through frost-encrusted windows, captivated by the endless white. Children pressed their faces to the glass, tracing imagined shapes in the snow and spinning stories of hidden animals, distant travelers, or mystical snow creatures wandering the plains. Parents whispered gentle tales, blending observation with imagination, helping curiosity blossom while calming any unease. Inside, warmth and life persisted as anchors. Fires crackled steadily, illuminating walls, floors, and the frost-covered panes. The air carried a comforting mix of aromas, the smokiness of burning wood, the subtle sweetness of roasting root vegetables, the faint tang of snow, and the richness of freshly baked bread. Each inhalation reminded the family that life endured, nurtured by care, patience, and togetherness. Meals were deliberate and slow, infused with mindfulness. Bread was torn carefully, soup ladled with attention, and coffee or tea savoured for both warmth and comfort. Small acts of care, adjusting blankets, brushing hair free of frost, gently stroking an animal's fur, were imbued with meaning, reinforcing bonds and creating a sanctuary of calm amid the storm's omnipresence. Animals moved with quiet attentiveness, mirroring the household's steady rhythm. Horses shifted gently in stalls, cows pressed closer together for warmth, and dogs padded softly, ears pricked to the subtle changes of the landscape. In their shared presence, humans and animals together embraced the frozen horizons, finding both awe and reassurance in the quiet expanses beyond the home. The frosted horizons, endless and serene, became a gentle reminder that even beneath layers of snow and ice, life could persist, hope could endure, and calm observation could reveal beauty and continuity in the most challenging circumstances. By the 37th day, the frost itself seemed to murmur. Tiny crystals formed and shifted across window panes, catching the dim light and creating a soft, sparkling, soundless chorus that filled rooms with a sense of magic. Families paused to notice these subtle changes, letting the delicate patterns and glimmers become a meditation, a quiet reminder of life's beauty, even in the harshest winter. Children leaned close to the glass, following intricate frost patterns with fingertips, imagining secret pathways for woodland creatures or sparkling trails for snow sprites. Parents gently guided these moments, sharing soft stories about patience, endurance, and wonder, turning observation into a calm, immersive experience that soothed curiosity and sparked imagination. Inside, the hearth remained central, radiating warmth that softened shadows and illuminated the frost's crystalline dance. The air carried comforting scents, the smoky aroma of firewood, earthy root vegetables roasting, the faint sweetness of freshly baked bread, and the clean, crisp tang of snow sneaking in through tiny cracks. Each breath reinforced calm and presence, reminding the family that life and warmth continued amidst the frozen world outside. Meals were shared with mindful care. Bread was torn slowly, soup sipped with attention, and coffee or tea warmed chilled hands and spirits. Even the smallest gestures, folding blankets, brushing snow from hair, stroking a pet's fur, became acts of connection and resilience, reinforcing the sanctuary within the home. Animals seemed to sense the gentle murmur of frost. Horses shifted softly in stalls, cows pressed together for warmth, and dogs padded lightly, attuned to the household's rhythm. Together, Humans and animals found comfort in the delicate patterns and soft shimmer, letting the subtle magic of frost guide calm, patience, and quiet joy in the long winter days. The murmur of frost became a silent lullaby, a gentle reminder that even in relentless snow and ice, life persisted with grace, hope endured, and the quiet beauty of nature could soothe hearts and minds alike. By the 38th day, the storm's presence was felt even in the subtle, almost imperceptible shifts of air. Families noticed the winter's breath, the cold draft that slipped through cracks, the faint whisper of snow moving across the plains, and the way icy air pressed gently against frosted windows. Though mild compared to earlier gusts, it reminded everyone of the blizzard's persistent power and the delicate balance between warmth and exposure. Children shivered slightly at the breeze, and parents wrapped them more snugly in blankets, tucking scarves and mittens with careful attention. Soft voices whispered tales of winter spirits, snow-covered fields, and hidden creatures surviving in quiet resilience. These stories transformed the chill into curiosity and wonder, turning the biting air into a gentle teacher of patience and attentiveness. The hearth remained a haven. Flames flickered softly, warming the room and casting golden light across frost patterns and family faces. The air carried familiar scents, the smokiness of the fire, the earthy aroma of vegetables roasting slowly, the faint sweetness of bread, and the crisp freshness of snow. Each breath grounded the family, reminding them of the warmth, sustenance, and life that continued despite the storm. Meals were savored with mindful slowness. Bread was torn carefully, soup ladled with deliberate care, and coffee or tea sipped in meditative pauses. Every gesture, smoothing blankets, brushing hair free of frost, stroking an animal's fur, became a small ritual of connection and care, anchoring everyone in comfort and presence. Animals mirrored this awareness of winter's breath. Horses shifted gently in stalls, cows huddled close, and dogs padded softly, ears alert but calm. The household moved together in measured rhythm, attuned to the subtle signs of the storm and the lessons embedded in its quiet persistence. The winter's breath, soft yet constant, became a companion, a reminder of endurance, patience, and the delicate interplay between the outside world and the sanctuary of home. In its gentle whispers, families found mindfulness, reassurance, and the quiet beauty of life persisting through relentless cold. By the 39th day, the simple act of moving through the home had become a mindful rhythm. Each footstep, soft on rugs, careful on floorboards, deliberate across icy doorways, was part of the household's slow, measured dance of endurance. Families noticed the subtle sounds, the creak of timber, the shuffle of boots, the tap of a spoon against a bowl, and let them guide a steady cadence of calm and awareness. Children followed this rhythm instinctively, carrying small tasks with deliberate care, stirring a pot, folding a blanket, or brushing snow from clothing. Parents moved with the same quiet attentiveness, guiding, encouraging, and embodying patience, teaching that even routine movements could be comforting and grounding when approached mindfully. The hearth's warmth remained the constant center. Flames flickered, casting soft golden reflections on walls, window frost, and the faces of those gathered nearby. The air carried layered scents of life, smoky wood, earthy root vegetables roasting slowly, the sweet aroma of freshly baked bread, and the faint metallic tang of snow pressing against windows. Every breath brought reassurance and presence, a sensory reminder of the world inside as separate from the storm's endless white outside. Meals were gentle rituals taken with deliberate slowness. Bread was broken carefully, soup sipped with awareness of warmth, coffee or tea enjoyed with each mindful sip. Small gestures, tucking blankets around shoulders, brushing hair free of frost, smoothing an animal's fur, became acts of connection, binding the household together through rhythm, patience, and care. Animals followed the household's pace. Horses shifted in quiet motion, cows huddled together for warmth, and dogs moved softly, attentive yet calm. Together, humans and animals shared the rhythm of footsteps, the steady heartbeat of survival, and the quiet lesson that even amid relentless snow, life persisted with balance, grace, and quiet endurance. By the 40th day, families began to notice the quiet corners of their homes in a new way. Small alcoves, shadowed nooks, and spaces behind furniture became sanctuaries for thought, reflection, or gentle play. Children curled up with blankets, tracing frost patterns on nearby windows or quietly drawing in dusting of snow carried indoors. Parents often settled in these corners as well, reading softly, mending clothing, or quietly observing, finding peace in solitude and stillness. The hearth's glow spilled gently into these corners, blending golden light with the muted blue of winter outside. The air carried layered, comforting scents, smoky wood from the fire, earthy sweetness from roasting vegetables, faint warmth from bread baking, and the crisp, clean tang of snow seeping through cracks. Each inhalation grounded the family, reinforcing calm and connection to the steady rhythm of life inside. Meals continued with care and mindfulness. Each bite of bread, spoonful of soup, or sip of coffee or tea was savored, slow and intentional. Small gestures, folding blankets, brushing frost from hair, patting an animal's fur, became acts of quiet reassurance, connecting family members and animals through attentiveness and care. Animals themselves sought the quiet corners. Horses pressed gently against barn walls, cows huddled in peaceful clusters, and dogs nestled into corners of the home, alert but calm. These intimate spaces offered safety and warmth, a pause from the storm's unending presence. The quiet corners of the home became more than shelter. They were spaces of reflection, mindfulness, and subtle wonder. Families discovered that even in relentless snow and isolation, moments of peace and gentle observation could provide comfort, hope, and the enduring beauty of life carefully preserved. By the 41st day, the pantry had become a sacred space, a repository of sustenance and quiet reassurance. Shelves lined with jars of preserves, sacks of flour, and carefully stored root vegetables were dusted lightly with frost at the edges, reminding the family of both the storm's persistence and the bounty that endurance had preserved. Children peeked inside with curiosity, tracing glass jars with cold fingers, listening to the subtle creak of wooden shelves, and imagining the stories each preserved fruit or vegetable might hold. Parents guided them gently, explaining the care it took to gather, store, and ration provisions, turning practical lessons into gentle stories of foresight, patience, and quiet resilience. The hearth's warmth and soft glow extended even to the pantry, where shadows danced across frost-laced jars and sacks of food. The air was tinged with comforting scents, earthy vegetables, the subtle sweetness of dried fruit, faint smoke from the nearby fire, and the crisp freshness of snow slipping in through cracks. Each inhale grounded the family, reminding them that life, sustenance, and warmth persisted despite the white world beyond. Meals were taken with careful attention, every bite savored. Bread was torn deliberately, soup ladled with patience, and coffee or tea sipped slowly, connecting warmth and nourishment with mindful awareness. Small gestures, folding blankets, brushing frost from hair, stroking a loyal animal, reinforced bonds of care and shared endurance. Animals were drawn to the scent and presence of the pantry as well. Horses stood quietly in nearby stalls, cows pressed close in warmth, and dogs padded softly toward the comforting aroma, adding their presence to the household's rhythm. The frosted pantry became a symbol of preparation, patience, and quiet triumph. It reminded the family that even under relentless snow, careful planning, attentiveness, and shared care could preserve life, warmth, and hope, creating a sanctuary of nourishment and gentle reassurance amidst the storm. By the 42nd day, the hearth had become more than warmth. It was the center of nightly storytelling, a ritual that filled the home with soft voices and gentle imagination. Families gathered closely around the flickering flames, children nestled in blankets, and parents' faces glowed in the firelight as they shared tales of courage, survival, and quiet wonder. The fire crackled steadily, casting dancing shadows across frost-laced windows, walls, and ceiling beams. The air was rich with layered scents, the smoky warmth of burning wood, earthy sweetness of roasting root vegetables, faint aroma of freshly baked bread, and the subtle tang of snow pressing against window edges. Each inhalation grounded the listeners, blending comfort with attention, warmth with the soft thrill of imagined worlds. Children traced patterns in the frost, whispered comments about the stories, or asked gentle questions, while parents guided them through lessons of patience, care, and hope. Every story was told slowly, each word deliberate, allowing imagination to blossom without urgency. The room became a sanctuary of calm, where fear was softened by attention and curiosity was nurtured by warmth. Meals, often taken before storytelling, remained deliberate and mindful. Bread was broken carefully, soup sipped with awareness of its heat, and coffee or tea enjoyed as a quiet, comforting ritual. Small gestures, tucking blankets around shoulders, brushing snow from hair, or patting a loyal animal, reinforced bonds, creating a cocoon of security, care, and presence. Animals added to the gentle rhythm. Horses shifted quietly in their stalls, cows huddled in measured closeness, and dogs padded softly along the floor, ears attuned to the murmur of fire and human voices. Together, humans and animals shared the warmth, presence, and calm storytelling, creating an enduring rhythm that countered the storm's unceasing roar. The Hearthside stories became a nightly balm, reminding the family that even in relentless snow, life could be filled with warmth, connection, and imagination. Through careful attention and gentle narration, the storm's fury was softened, and hope persisted in each flickering shadow and whispered word. By the 43rd day, the storm had entered a quieter phase. Snow fell gently, almost silently, drifting down in soft, feathery flakes that settled slowly on rooftops, trees, and drifts. Families pressed faces to frosted windows, mesmerized by the delicate ballet of white against the muted winter sky. The world outside seemed hushed, as if time itself had paused to admire the gentle descent. Children traced shapes in the frost, imagining tiny creatures landing lightly on snowflakes or distant travelers moving unseen through the soft white. Parents whispered stories of resilience, patience, and courage, weaving the stillness of snowfall into lessons of hope and quiet endurance. The hushed beauty of the storm became a lullaby, coaxing calm and reflection even amid relentless cold. Inside, warmth radiated from the hearth and lanterns, blending with the muted daylight filtering through frost-laced windows. The air carried comforting scents: smoky wood from the fire, earthy sweetness of roasting vegetables, the faint aroma of fresh bread, and the crisp tang of snow pressed against tiny cracks. Each breath grounded the family, a gentle reminder that life and warmth persisted despite the white world beyond. Meals were shared with deliberate care. Bread was torn slowly, soup ladled thoughtfully, and coffee or tea sipped with mindful attention. Every gesture, folding blankets, brushing hair free of frost, or patting an animal's fur, became an act of connection and reassurance, reinforcing the household's quiet rhythm. Animals moved with soft attentiveness. Horses shifted in stalls, cows huddled closely for warmth, and dogs padded gently, ears alert yet calm. Together, humans and animals embraced the silent snowfall, letting its gentle presence foster mindfulness, comfort, and the quiet realization that even in the longest winter, beauty, calm, and hope could be found in the smallest, softest details. By the 44th day, the rhythm of daily life had become a source of quiet reassurance. Families settled into routines, each task approached with deliberate care and mindfulness, transforming ordinary moments into anchors of stability amid the storm's unrelenting presence. Breakfasts were slow and intentional, chores approached gently, and evenings were filled with calm rituals that offered both comfort and a sense of continuity. Children helped wherever they could, stirring pots, tidying blankets, or brushing snow from boots and clothing. Parents guided them with soft words, demonstrating that patience, care, and attention could turn even mundane acts into moments of warmth, learning, and shared connection. These routines became the heartbeat of life, a gentle counterpoint to the blizzard's ceaseless rhythm outside. The hearth remained central, casting golden light that softened shadows and illuminated frost-laced windows. The air carried familiar grounding scents, smoky wood, roasting root vegetables, the subtle sweetness of fresh bread, and the crisp tang of snow seeping in through cracks. Each inhalation reinforced calm, connection, and the comforting knowledge that life and warmth persisted within these walls. Meals were savored slowly, each bite of bread and spoonful of soup imbued with attention and gratitude. Coffee or tea was enjoyed in mindful pauses, every gesture, from folding blankets to brushing hair, from stroking an animal's fur to adjusting a quilt, became an act of presence and care, anchoring the family in stability and comfort. Animals, too, followed the rhythm of routine. Horses shifted quietly in their stalls, cows huddled with measured closeness, and dogs padded softly, attuned to the household's deliberate pace. Together, humans and animals embraced the quiet predictability of daily life, finding reassurance, warmth, and calm in the cycles of care and attentiveness. The warmth of routine, steady and deliberate, became a quiet beacon amid relentless snow. Even as the blizzard raged beyond, families found security, calm, and hope in these repeated acts of care, discovering that consistency, presence, and gentle attention could transform hardship into quiet resilience. By the 45th day, subtle changes in the storm hinted at a gentle shift. The snow, though still deep and pervasive, began to settle differently. Tiny gaps of soft grey light appeared through the dense clouds, and the air carried the faintest hint of warmth. Families noticed these signs with quiet anticipation, understanding that winter's harshest grip might slowly begin to loosen. Children pressed faces to frosted windows, spotting patterns in the snow that seemed less rigid, more flowing, as if the world were breathing in a gentle, careful rhythm. Parents whispered stories of patience rewarded, of hidden life beneath the frozen layers, and of the promise of renewal. Each tale offered reassurance, teaching that even the longest winters eventually gave way to change and subtle beauty. Inside, the hearth and lanterns continued their work, casting golden pools of warmth and light. The air was layered with comforting scents, smoky wood, earthy vegetables roasting slowly, sweet bread rising gently, and the crisp tang of melting frost at the edges of windows. Each inhalation reminded the family of endurance, care, and life persisting amidst still challenging conditions. Meals remained slow and mindful, bread was torn deliberately, soup ladled with care, and coffee or tea sipped with full attention. Small acts, tucking blankets, brushing hair free of frost, gently patting an animal, remained sacred gestures of connection and reassurance, reinforcing bonds and patience as the world slowly shifted. Animals mirrored the household's gentle awareness. Horses shifted carefully, cows remained huddled but alert, and dogs padded softly, sensing the subtle changes in air and light. Together, humans and animals embraced this quiet transformation, recognizing that endurance, care, and calm observation revealed hope, even amid the lingering snow. The first hints of thaw became a gentle promise that change was possible, that life continued beneath the white expanse, and that patience, attention, and warmth could see a family safely through even the harshest of winters. By the 46th day, the storm had begun its slow retreat. Snow remained deep and soft, but the gusts had softened, clouds parted occasionally to reveal pale sunlight, and the air carried a faint warmth, tinged with promise. Families noticed the subtle signs: icicles melting slowly, patches of earth peeking through snowdrifts, and the distant sound of water trickling from rooftops. Children ran to windows with eager anticipation, tracing the first clear patterns of thaw, imagining small streams forming and life beginning to stir beneath the white blanket. Parents encouraged these observations, sharing stories of resilience, patience, and quiet miracles, emphasizing the hope that even the longest winters eventually make way for renewal. Inside, warmth persisted, fires burned steadily, lanterns glowed softly, and the household exhaled a collective sigh of calm and relief. The air was rich with familiar scents: smoky warmth from the hearth, earthy vegetables roasting, sweet bread, and the gentle freshness of melting frost. Each breath became a reminder that life endures, nurtured by care, patience, and the bonds of family and community. Meals were shared with deliberate attention. Bread was torn slowly, soup sipped with mindfulness, and coffee or tea savored for comfort and warmth. Every gesture, tucking blankets, brushing hair, or patting an animal, remained a ritual of presence, connection, and gratitude, anchoring everyone in the safety and rhythm of home. Animals sensed the shift as well. Horses stretched gently, cows shifted with more ease, and dogs padded lightly, exploring the softened air and subtle changes in the landscape. Together, humans and animals embraced the gentle return of spring, savoring the promise of life, renewal, and calm after a long, challenging winter. The gentle return of spring became a quiet celebration. The blizzard's power had faded, leaving behind memories of endurance, care, and quiet resilience. Families reflected on the long days of snow, the warmth found in hearth and home, and the steadfast presence of one another. Calm, patience, and hope had seen them through. As night fell, the household settled in for rest. Fires burned low, lanterns glowed softly, and every breath was slow, measured, and peaceful. Outside, the snow still sparkled under the moon, but inside, hearts were warm, minds were calm, and the promise of tomorrow felt gentle and sure. Thank you for sharing this journey through the Great Blizzard of 1949. Take a deep breath, let the warmth of your home, or your imagination, envelop you, and allow yourself to drift into calm rest. Sleep well, knowing that endurance, care, and hope will always return, like the soft light after a long winter. Good night.